The arena on Station Varix 7 was built for spectacle. Thousands of seats rose in great rings around a fighting pit made of hardened steel. Lights blazed down from above, turning the pit into a stage where warriors from across the galaxy came to prove their worth. Every species that had mastered space travel sent their champions here. The Kronak came with their 4 arms and scales like armor. The Veth brought their speed and poison claws. The massive Torgans stood 3 meters tall with fists that could crush starship hulls. All of them fought in the arena. All of them sought glory. But nobody expected anything from the human woman who stood at the edge of the pit that night. Nomi was small by galactic standards. She stood just under 2 meters, which made her shorter than most of the fighters who came to test themselves. Her skin was dark brown, marked by old scars that told stories of battles already won. Her hair was cut short and close to her skull. Her eyes were calm and steady as she watched the crowd around her. She wore simple clothes, a gray shirt that fit tight against her muscled frame, black pants that allowed her to move freely, cloth wraps around her hands and wrists, nothing fancy, nothing impressive. The crowd barely noticed her standing there. The announcer, a Velish with bright purple feathers, spoke into the arena's sound system. His voice boomed across the seats. Our next challenger comes from the outer sectors, a human female. This is her first time in the pit. There was laughter from the crowd. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as weak creatures. They had no natural weapons, no claws or fangs or poison glands. They could not see in the dark or hear sounds from great distances. To most species, humans were clever animals at best. Certainly not fighters. She will face Grothak the Crusher, the announcer continued. More laughter came, but this time it was mixed with cheers. Grothak was a Torgan champion who had won 43 fights in the arena. He had never lost. He had killed 9 of his opponents. The crowd loved him. Grothak stepped into the pit from the opposite side. He was enormous. His gray skin was thick like stone. His arms were as wide as Kala's entire body. When he smiled, his mouth showed rows of flat teeth made for grinding bone. He looked at Kala and snorted with amusement. "A human," he said, his voice deep and rumbling. "I will try not to kill you too quickly, little creature. The crowd wants a show." Kala said nothing. She walked to the center of the pit and took her position. Her feet were set wide. Her hands came up in front of her face. She looked completely relaxed, like she was waiting for a friend rather than facing a monster. The signal for the fight came as a loud horn blast. Grothak charged immediately. His huge feet shook the metal floor. He raised both fists above his head, ready to bring them down and smash Kala into the ground. Kala moved. She did not run away. She ran toward him. At the last moment she dropped low and slid across the floor, passing between his legs. Before Grothak could turn, she was behind him. Her leg swept out and struck the back of his knee with perfect precision. The crowd gasped. Grothak stumbled. His leg buckled for just a moment. It was not enough to bring him down, but it made him turn slowly, confused. He had expected the human to try to run. He had expected fear. Kala was already moving again. She jumped high, using Grothak's bent knee as a step, and drove her elbow into the soft tissue under his jaw. The impact made a sound like thunder. Grothak's head snapped back. He staggered. "How?" someone in the crowd shouted. "How is she doing this?" The answer was simple, though the crowd did not understand it. Humans were not strong like Torgans. They were not fast like Veth. But humans had something else. They had spent millions of years on a brutal planet, fighting for survival against every kind of predator. They had learned to study their enemies. They had learned to find weaknesses. They had developed fighting arts that turned an opponent's strength against them. Nomi had trained in these arts her whole life. She knew exactly where to strike. She knew how to use her enemy's size against him. And most importantly, she was not afraid. Grothak roared and swung his massive arm in a wide arc. Kala ducked under it easily. She stepped inside his reach and delivered 3 quick punches to his ribs. Each punch was targeted at a specific cluster of nerves. Grothak felt pain shoot through his body like fire. "Stand still," he bellowed. He tried to grab her, but she was always moving, always just out of reach. She was like water flowing around rocks. Every time he attacked, she was somewhere else. Every time he left an opening, she struck. The fight lasted 12 minutes. By the end, Grothak was breathing hard. Blood ran from cuts on his face where Kala had struck with her elbow and knee. His left arm hung limp at his side, the shoulder joint damaged by a precise strike. He tried one more desperate charge, but his legs failed him. He collapsed to one knee. Kala stood before him. She was barely breathing hard. She looked at him with those calm, steady eyes. "Yield," she said quietly. "There is no shame in it." Grothak looked up at her. For a long moment the arena was silent. Then slowly the great Torgon bowed his head. "I yield," he said. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Many shouted in disbelief. A human had just defeated the undefeated champion. It was impossible. It was unthinkable, yet it had happened. Kala helped Grothak to his feet. She bowed to him with respect, then turned and walked out of the pit. Behind her, the announcer struggled to find words. The crowd continued to roar. In the shadows near the arena's exit, a figure watched with great interest. It was a Kronak noble named Vex, one of the most powerful beings in this sector of space. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the human woman. "Interesting," he whispered to himself. "Very interesting indeed." Word of Kala's victory spread quickly through the station. By the next morning, everyone on Varix 7 knew about the human woman who had defeated Grothak the Crusher. The story traveled even faster across the data networks that connected the galaxy. Within days, Kala Nomi's name was being spoken on 100 different worlds. Kala did not care about fame. She had come to the arena for a different reason. She needed money. More importantly, she needed information. Somewhere on this station, there were people who knew what had happened to her brother. He had disappeared 6 months ago while investigating a criminal network called the Shadow Hand. Kala had followed his trail here to the fighting pits of Varix 7. She was sitting in a small food hall, eating a simple meal of protein cubes and water, when the Kronak noble approached her table. Vex was tall even for his species. His scales were a deep blue color that marked him as highborn. Gold rings decorated his 4 arms. He smiled at her with a mouth full of sharp teeth. "May I join you?" he asked politely. Kala looked at him for a long moment. She saw the expensive clothes. She saw the guards standing at a distance, watching carefully. She knew immediately that this was someone important and probably dangerous. "It's a free station," she said. Vex sat down across from her. "I watched your fight last night. It was remarkable. I have seen Grothak defeat many opponents. I never thought I would see him lose." "Everyone loses eventually," Kala said. She continued eating. "Indeed," Vex leaned forward. "I have a proposition for you. I manage a team of fighters, the best fighters. We compete in tournaments across the sector, fighting for enormous prizes. I want you to join us." Kala set down her food and looked at him directly. "Why would I do that?" "Money, glory, the chance to prove yourself against the greatest warriors in the galaxy." Vex spread his 4 hands wide. "What more could a fighter want?" "Information," Kala said quietly. "I want information about the Shadow Hand." Vex's expression changed slightly. The smile remained, but something cold appeared in his eyes. "That is a dangerous organization to ask about. Why would you be interested in them?" "They took someone from me. I want him back." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vex nodded slowly. "Join my team. Win fights for me. In return, I will help you find what you are looking for. I have connections everywhere. If anyone can lead you to the Shadow Hand, it is me." Kala studied his face. She knew he was not telling her everything. She knew there was probably a trap hidden somewhere in his offer, but she also knew that she had no other leads. Her search had led her to dead ends and locked doors. If Vex could open those doors, she had to take the chance. Deal, she said. The tournament circuit was everything Vex had promised and more. Kala traveled from station to station, planet to planet, fighting in arenas that made Varix 7 look small. She faced warriors of every species, a Veth assassin who moved faster than the eye could follow, a pair of Gelzer twins who fought as one mind in two bodies, a cyborg champion from the machine worlds who had replaced most of his body with metal. She defeated them all. Each victory brought her more fame. Each fight taught her more about her opponents. She learned their styles, their weaknesses, their fears. The Veth assassin relied too much on his speed. When Kala predicted his movements and caught him mid-strike, he did not know how to respond. The Gelzer twins shared thoughts, but that connection went both ways. When Kala hurt one, the other felt the pain too. The cyborg was strong but slow. His metal limbs could not feel pressure or pain, so he did not notice when Kala damaged the joints until they stopped working. After each fight, Vex gave her pieces of information about the Shadow Hand. Small pieces at first, names of people connected to them, locations where they did business. But as Kala's victories piled up, the information became more valuable. She learned that the Shadow Hand operated a network of illegal trade routes. They moved weapons, drugs, and slaves across the galaxy. They had members in every government and every corporation. And she learned that her brother Marcus had gotten too close to exposing one of their biggest operations. "He is still alive," Vex told her one night after she had won a particularly brutal match against 3 opponents at once. "They are holding him at a facility in the Corax system, but you cannot simply go there and take him back. The place is a fortress." "Then how do I get him?" Kala asked. Vex smiled his cold smile. "The Shadow Hand is hosting a special tournament, an invitation-only event for their most wealthy and powerful members. The prize is anything the winner desires. You could ask for your brother." "How do I get an invitation?" "By becoming so famous that they cannot ignore you, by defeating every champion in the sector, by making them afraid of what you might become if they do not control you." Vex's eyes glittered with something that might have been greed or might have been fear. "You are close, Kala Nomi. A few more victories and they will have no choice but to invite you." Kala nodded and turned away. She knew that Vex was using her for his own purposes. She knew that the Shadow Hand was probably using him too. Everyone in this game had their own agenda, but none of that mattered. She would play their games. She would win their tournaments. And when the time came, she would burn their empire to the ground. The next fight was in 3 days. Her opponent was a Torgan warrior named Kraj who had heard about her defeat of Grothak. He had sworn to avenge his people's honor by destroying the human who had embarrassed them. He was younger than Grothak, faster and meaner. The betting odds favored him by a wide margin. Kala spent those 3 days training. She ran through the station's corridors until her lungs burned. She practiced her strikes against training dummies until her knuckles bled. She meditated in her small room, visualizing the fight in her mind over and over again. When the night of the fight came, she was ready. Kraj was everything she had expected, fast for a Torgan, aggressive. He did not wait for her to attack. He came at her immediately, throwing punches and kicks with wild fury. But fury was not enough against someone who had trained their whole life to be calm in chaos. Kala dodged and weaved. She let Kraj exhaust himself with his attacks. She studied his patterns, noting the slight delay before his left hook, the way he dropped his guard after a kick. When she finally struck back, every blow landed exactly where she intended. The fight ended with Kraj unconscious on the floor and the crowd chanting Kala's name. She stood in the center of the arena, her arms raised in victory, and knew that her next opponent would be the Shadow Hand itself. The invitation came exactly as Vex had predicted. A small data chip delivered to Kala's quarters by a messenger who disappeared before she could ask questions. The chip contained coordinates, a date, and a simple message. "You have been chosen to compete in the grand tournament of shadows. Your presence is required. Refusal is not an option." Kala traveled to the coordinates alone. The journey took her to a remote part of space, far from any major trade routes or inhabited worlds. The tournament was being held on a private station that did not appear on any official maps. It was a massive structure, built like a fortress, with weapon systems visible on every surface. When her small ship docked, she was met by guards wearing the black uniforms of the Shadow Hand. They searched her for weapons and found none. What they did not understand was that Kala herself was a weapon. Her hands, her feet, her elbows and knees had all been trained to deliver deadly force. She did not need a blade or a gun. The station's interior was designed to impress and intimidate. Great halls filled with artwork stolen from 100 worlds. Corridors lined with guards and security systems. Everywhere she looked, Kala saw wealth and power on display. The Shadow Hand wanted their guests to understand exactly who controlled them. She was taken to a waiting area where the other fighters had gathered. There were 12 of them in total. Each one had a reputation for being the deadliest warrior of their species. Kala recognized some of them from her time on the tournament circuit. Others she knew only from stories and legends. One fighter caught her attention immediately. A massive creature standing in the corner, covered in gray scales and muscle. Its eyes burned with red fire, and its hands ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through starship armor. This was a Vorax, a species that had been thought extinct for centuries. They were living weapons, bred for war by an ancient empire that had been destroyed in battles long forgotten. The creature looked at Kala and smiled with a mouth full of fangs. "Human," it said in a voice like grinding stone. "I am called Raxus. They say you are the one to beat. I do not believe them." "Believe what you want," Kala replied calmly. The tournament rules were explained by a hooded figure who called himself the Master of Games. The fights would continue until only one warrior remained standing. There were no rules except one. Killing was permitted but not required. If a fighter yielded, the match was over. The final winner would receive any prize they desired, within reason. Within reason, Kala thought. That probably meant they would find ways to refuse her if she asked for something they did not want to give. But that was a problem for later. First, she had to win. Her first match was against a Veth warrior named Syrinx. He was faster than any opponent she had faced before. His claws were coated with a paralytic poison that could freeze her muscles with a single scratch. The crowd of wealthy criminals who filled the seats around the arena cheered with excitement as the fight began. Syrinx moved like lightning. He struck at Kala's throat, her chest, her stomach, faster than the eye could follow. But Kala had trained against speed her whole life. She had learned to read the small movements that came before an attack. The shift of weight, the tension in muscles, the direction of the eyes. By the time Syrinx moved, she already knew where he would be. She dodged every strike. She led him around the arena, making him chase her, making him tired. When he grew frustrated and overextended, she caught his arm and twisted. The joint snapped with a wet crack. Syrinx screamed and fell. Before he could recover, Kala was on him. Her knee pressed against his throat, cutting off his air. "Yield," she said. He yielded. The second match was harder. She faced a pair of Kronak brothers who had been champions in illegal fighting rings for decades. They worked together perfectly, attacking from different angles, never giving her a moment to rest. Kala took several hits that left bruises deep in her flesh, but she kept moving. She kept thinking, and when she saw an opportunity, she struck. She disabled the younger brother with a kick to the knee that shattered the joint. When the older brother rushed to help him, Kala was waiting. She caught him in a chokehold that he could not break no matter how hard he struggled. Within seconds, he lost consciousness. The third match, the fourth, the fifth, Kala fought and won. She was hurt. She was tired, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Every fight brought her closer to Marcus. Every victory was another step toward saving her brother. When the final match was announced, Kala was not surprised to see Raxus waiting for her in the arena. The Vorax had torn through his opponents with brutal efficiency. 3 of his fights had ended in death. He stood in the center of the pit, covered in the blood of his enemies, looking at Kala with those burning red eyes. "I have never killed a human before," he said. "I am curious how you will die." The fight began without warning. Raxus attacked with speed that seemed impossible for his size. His claws cut the air where Kala had been standing a fraction of a second before. She rolled away, came up in a fighting stance, and barely dodged his next attack. This was different from her other fights. Raxus was not just strong and fast, he was also smart. He learned from his mistakes. When Kala dodged one way, he adjusted his next attack to cut off her escape. When she tried to hit his weak points, she found that his scales were too thick to penetrate with punches alone. She needed a new strategy. She needed to think. Kala let Raxus drive her back toward the edge of the arena. The crowd screamed with excitement, thinking she was finished. But Kala was watching Raxus carefully. She noticed that when he attacked with his right claw, he left his left side exposed for just a moment. She noticed that his eyes tracked her movements a split second before his body followed. She had her plan. When Raxus attacked again, Kala did something unexpected. Instead of dodging, she stepped into his strike. His claw scraped across her shoulder, drawing blood, but she was inside his reach now. Too close for him to use his claws effectively. She drove her elbow into his eye with all her strength. Raxus howled. He had never been hurt like this before. He staggered back, one hand covering his damaged eye. For the first time, there was something other than confidence in his expression. There was fear. Kala did not give him time to recover. She attacked relentlessly, targeting his eyes, his throat, the joints between his scales. Every strike was precise. Every movement was calculated. She was bleeding from a dozen wounds, but she did not slow down. She could not slow down. The fight lasted nearly an hour. By the end, both warriors were covered in blood. Raxus was barely standing, both eyes swollen shut, several of his scales cracked and broken. Kala felt like her body was on fire, every muscle screaming in pain. With one final effort, she jumped and drove both feet into Raxus's chest. The impact sent him flying backward. He crashed into the arena wall and did not get up. The arena fell silent. Then slowly, applause began. It grew louder and louder until the entire station seemed to shake with the sound. Kala stood alone in the center of the pit, the last fighter standing, the winner of the grand tournament of shadows. The Master of Games appeared at the edge of the arena. His hood was pushed back now, revealing a face that was neither old nor young, with features that seemed to shift and change when Kala looked directly at them. He studied her with eyes that held no warmth. "Congratulations, human," he said. "You have done what many believed impossible. You have won our tournament. Now name your prize." Kala stood straight despite the pain in her body. Blood dripped from her wounds onto the arena floor, but her voice was strong and clear. "My brother, Marcus Nomi. You are holding him at your facility in the Corax system. I want him released." The Master of Games smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Ah yes, the investigator who learned too much about our operations. We wondered if that was why you came." He paused, seeming to consider her request. "Very well, you have earned your prize. Your brother will be released." Kala felt relief flood through her. After months of searching, fighting, and suffering, she had finally succeeded. Marcus would be free. "However," the Master of Games continued, "there is another matter to discuss. You see, you have made yourself very valuable to us. Your skills, your reputation, your ability to defeat any opponent. These are things we cannot simply let walk away." He snapped his fingers and guards appeared at every entrance to the arena. "You will join the Shadow Hand. You will fight for us when we command it. You will obey without question. In return, we will allow you and your brother to live." Kala looked at the guards surrounding her. There were at least 50 of them, all armed with weapons that could kill her in an instant. She was wounded, exhausted, barely able to stand. By any reasonable measure, she had no chance of escape. She smiled. "You made a mistake," she said quietly. The Master of Games frowned. "What mistake?" "You assumed I came here alone." Kala reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. She pressed the button on its surface. "I have been sending information about your organization to the Galactic Authority for months. Every name, every location, every operation. Right now, their fleet is surrounding this station." As if to confirm her words, alarms began to sound throughout the station. The wealthy criminals who had been watching the tournament started to panic, rushing toward the exits. The guards looked at each other uncertainly, their weapons no longer pointed at Kala. The Master of Games' face twisted with rage. "You fool! Do you know what you have done? We will kill you for this. We will kill everyone you have ever loved." "You will try," Kala said. She was already moving, striking the nearest guards before they could react. Despite her wounds, despite her exhaustion, she fought with a fury that made her earlier battles look gentle. These were the people who had taken her brother. These were the criminals who had caused suffering across the galaxy, and now they would pay. The next few minutes were chaos. The station shook as the Galactic Authority ships began their assault. Explosions rocked the corridors as the Shadow Hand's defenses were overwhelmed. Kala fought her way through guard after guard, heading for the docking bay where she hoped to find a ship. She found the Master of Games blocking her path in the final corridor. He had thrown off his robes, revealing a body covered in cybernetic enhancements. His arms had been replaced with mechanical limbs that ended in spinning blades. His eyes glowed with red light. "If I must die today," he said, "I will take you with me." He attacked with speed and power that would have killed any normal fighter. His blades cut through the air in patterns designed to slice Kala apart. But Kala was not a normal fighter. She had faced monsters. She had defeated champions. She had survived everything the galaxy had thrown at her. She dodged his first strike, ducked under his second, and found the weak point in his third. Her hand drove into the gap between his mechanical arm and his body, grabbing the wires and circuits inside. She pulled with all her remaining strength. The arm came free in a spray of sparks and fluid. The Master of Games screamed and fell back. Before he could recover, Kala was on him. Her hands found his throat and she squeezed. "My brother," she said as she watched the light fade from his eyes. "Where is he?" "Deck 17, he gasped. "Cell block 4. Kala released him and ran. The station was coming apart around her. Fires burned in every corridor. The ceiling collapsed in places, forcing her to climb over debris. But she did not stop. She could not stop. She found the cell block just as a section of the wall exploded inward. Authority soldiers poured through the breach, securing the area. Kala ignored them and rushed to the cells, looking through each window until she found the one she was looking for. Marcus was thin and pale, clearly mistreated during his months of captivity. But he was alive. When he saw Kala through the window, his eyes went wide with shock and then joy. "Kala," he said, his voice weak but filled with wonder. "How?" She found the release mechanism and opened the cell door. Then she pulled her brother into her arms and held him tight. "I came for you," she said simply. "I will always come for you." The extraction was handled by the Galactic Authority. They brought Kala and Marcus aboard their flagship, where medical staff treated their wounds. The officer in charge, a stern woman named Admiral Chen, took Kala's statement about everything she had learned about the Shadow Hand. "You did something remarkable," Chen said when the statement was finished. "We have been trying to bring down the Shadow Hand for decades. In one night, you gave us everything we needed to destroy them." Kala shook her head. "I did not do it for you. I did it for my brother." "I know," Chen smiled slightly. "That is what makes you humans so interesting. You are not the strongest species in the galaxy. You are not the fastest or the smartest. But when you decide to do something, when you truly commit to a goal, nothing can stop you. It is a quality that frightens many of the other species. Kala thought about the arena. She thought about all the fighters she had defeated, all the battles she had won. She thought about Raxus and the fear she had seen in his eyes when he realized he could not beat her. "Good," she said, "let them be frightened." A month later, Kala and Marcus sat together in a small cafe on Earth. The sun was setting over the mountains in the distance, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Marcus was recovering well, gaining weight and strength every day. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they were growing less frequent. "What will you do now?" he asked his sister. "Go back to the fighting circuit?" Kala considered the question. She had offers from all over the galaxy. Tournament promoters wanted her to compete. Military organizations wanted to recruit her. Even the Galactic Authority had asked her to join their Special Operations Division. "No," she said finally. "I fought because I had to, because you needed me. Now that you are safe, I think I would like to find something else." "Like what?" She smiled. It was a rare expression on her face, one that Marcus had not seen in a long time. "I think I would like to teach. There are young humans who need to learn what I know, how to fight, how to survive, how to protect the people they love." She looked at her scarred hands, the weapons she had made of herself. "I think it is time to pass that knowledge on." Marcus reached out and took his sister's hand. "I think that sounds perfect." They sat together and watched the sunset. Behind them, the galaxy continued to turn. Wars were fought and won. Empires rose and fell. Species competed for power and dominance. But here, on this small planet called Earth, a human woman who had risen from shadows found peace at last. And somewhere out there, in every arena and fighting pit across the stars, the story of Nomi was still being told. The human who had crushed every opponent. The warrior who could not be defeated. The woman who proved that humans were not weak creatures to be dismissed and ignored. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors.